Okay, we will go live in just a second. Okay. Fine. There's going to be a real kaleidoscope of emotions, combination of things I've been wanting to say for months. Some things just have been in my heart to, for years already. Um, yeah, I've been as they say in Yiddish, ois mensch, since this, even since the night before this war broke out, Leil Shabbos. I was couldn't understand why I was crying, very spontaneously, which is not. It's not hard to understand, it's nothing mystical. I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren in Israel, and I'm always worried about them. And person should have intuition that things are a little bit shaky in the environs of their children and grandchildren. But it really is already a wreck Leil Shabbos, and then since the news broke, on Yom HaShabbos, goes the watchman by the by the shul let us know what's going on. And it's just been, and I've been a lot of rabos machshavos ever since. Okay, I put something in the description of this video that I'm going to emphasize and double down on. I'm not looking for any confrontation. You don't like what I have to say, just click off. I'm not coming to fight with anybody. I'm not coming to change any minds. I'm done with that. I've despaired of that. I'll be called a hater and critical and please, right? I'm here to talk to people who want to listen. So if you receive this video by direct link from me, it's because I consider you either a Talmud, right, or someone that is a truth seeker and is oheves atochachos, wants to hear rebuke. Because even if a person doesn't know how to give it correctly, you should want to hear tochacha. Oheves tochachos, one of the memchestrom shatar nicknames by him. First be oheves atochachos, and I thought you were oheves atochachos, and if I was wrong about you, please just click off. I'm not here to fight with anybody. I'm not fighting with anybody, but I will speak the truth as I see it. I'm going to call it as I see it, and I don't care who it offends. But the people who are offended, I'm not talking to anyway, and they have no business listening to this video. I didn't send it to you, at least not intentionally, and I'm not asking anyone to listen to it. If someone else sent it to you, not on my achrayus. I'm trying to speak to the people that want to listen. Want to listen to me or want to listen in general. Okay. I know I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, drawing from the Rambam, and the Rambam laments in the beginning of his Igeres Tchias. He wrote Igeres Tchias HaMesim because he was accused of not believing in Tchias HaMesim. He says, everything I do, nothing helps. I made it one of the Yud Gimel Ikrim. You have to believe in Tchias HaMesim. Right? Paskin la'aloch in the Mishnah Torah. Anyone doesn't believe in Tchias HaMesim is not bikaris. I left nothing up to the imagination. Still, they accuse me of not believing in Tchias HaMesim. All right. So the Rambam had to clear his name. But why am I getting into this? That undoubtedly some snowflake is going to hear this video. I hope not. It's not geared to him. But some snowflake will hear this and get all offended, give me why am I mali v'latzara azos? The Rambam had to clear his name about Tchias HaMesim, even though it was so silly that he was accused of denying it. Right? Mali v'latzara azos. I ask myself, right? And I'll tell you another Rambam, right? A Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, when he explains why he's writing the book. And he says like this: I know that out of 1,000 people, 999 are going to find this book offensive and they're going to criticize me for it. Right? 999 out of 1,000. And they're going to criticize, and I'm going to suffer for it. But I'm writing it for that one out of 1,000. That also Hashem, that one truth seeker. It's for him. It's for him. And I'll take the barbs of 999 people to help that one guy. All right? So first of all, two things to learn from that Rambam. Okay? The responsibility, to help those who want to hear the truth as you understand it. Right? Right? There's to help them, even at the expense of suffering, for it greatly. There's another thing also. Numbers aren't important. Only 1 out of 1,000. Now, by the way, the Rambam, there's no doubt in my mind, he had a medrash in mind when he wrote those lines. The medrash that says, Elef nechnasim lemikra, and from them only Mea lemishnah, and from there only Asara letalmud. Umam echad yotze lahora, only one. Adod chsiv haben yakir li Ephraim. That 1 out of 1,000 is the haben yakir li Ephraim. The dear son of Ephraim. Right? Numbers don't matter. What's popular doesn't matter. And in this world of Hester Purim, which is the whole end of Purim, understand that Hester Purim is also from Hashem. In a world which runs Hester Purim, if something is popular, chances are the Sitracha really likes it because on his turf, Hester Purim. That's the big challenge of Purim. Understand the Hester Purim is really from Hashem also. Just the Sitracha takes advantage of that programming. And we'll talk about this more and maybe more on Purim itself. Right? Something being popular doesn't mean anything. A lot of people like it. That doesn't mean anything. Lo mirubchem bachar Hashem bachem. Right? Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, Hashem didn't choose you because you're a lot. Yatem ha'ma'at mikolamim. We're a nation of quality, not quantity. And one person who knows the emes, the whole world is kedai for him. That's a Mufresh Chazal. I mean, the way the Rambam understands it, what it means. Dal Amas is the place of one person. He already writes in his Hakdam Rizroim, the one Adam Hashem, the whole world is kedai for him. And that's, the 1 out of 1,000. And I don't care to be unpopular. And maybe that's part of one of the measures we'll get to. We shouldn't adopt ideas or go with certain because it's popular. Popular and MS are not only not synonymous ever, right? But in a hanhug of Hester Purim, chance of it's popular, there's got to be something that the Sitra Achra likes about it a lot. And that's why it's popular. Right? I'm not going to belabor a point with a famous story from Chaim Volozhiner that illustrates this point. I just don't have the strength. But what's popular, chances are there's got to be something really krum about it. Otherwise, why do people just fall in love with it? The Yitzhar doesn't mind it. That's why. Emes is what you have to struggle for, and emes is what is an acquired taste because there's resistance from the Yitzhar to hearing it. So it's very popular means the Yitzhar is not putting up any resistance. He doesn't mind it too much. Yeah. Okay. I need to preface first and foremost that it is not hyperbole that we are in the greatest danger we've been in since the Holocaust. This is not hyperbole. This is very real. The Shiite Muslims, are a mind virus that, radicalize like rich liberal kids, rich white liberal kids get, again, talking about if something catches on very well and very easily, because the Yitzhar doesn't mind it. What's the appeal? Well, it's evil. That's the appeal. So the Yitzhar allows it to excite you. If they make a catchy video and propaganda, the Yitzhar is not going to put up any filters, So it goes right in, And the problem is us that we have no filters, and we're going to talk about this. We don't have our own Teradika filters in our minds and hearts, and we're going to talk about that. It's really the big machla of the door. All right, and so if you just go with your animal impulses, you're going because it's a catchy tune. They said it with a lot of passion, or the people, they look very convicted, and you want to feel conviction like that. So Yetzer is not going to stop that, right? And and you understand, evil has no principles. Right? So, those Shiite Muslims on the one hand, will be anti-gay, this and that. It doesn't stop the leftist liberals who stand up for queers and every, ashkosa that Islam, is against, right? It's not a contradiction because evil has no principles. Evil he has no principles. So he plays both sides of the argument. He's not a principled person, the Sitra Achra. Amalek is not a principled person. Takes any side of the argument that works for him. And that's how you have this amazing thing, the leftists with the Islamists, and they're, even as we speak, the leftists are decrying this war, protesting against the war, Hashem Yirachim. Right? And that's why we are in danger, because there are proxies, and there are proxies, and there are sleeper cells, and there's the left, Hashem Yirachim. The left already made a few demonstrations, in here in America. It is very frightening. And on the right, also, we have some anti-Semites that say the Jews are leading us into this war. We are not safe. This is serious business. I said already years ago, like almost more than 20 years ago, when I was an interim Rosh Shiva, Magid Shir, in a place called Derech Eitz Chaim. It was temporary. We're learning Mesach Sevar Azar. So Beis Amud Beis, it says that in the future, Rome and all the nations, but Rome and Persia will be brought into the Riboshim first for an accounting, and they're going to want to be paid for any good that they did. And Hashem says, you did it just for yourself. As the Gemara says, why these two first and what makes them so special? Because their malchus will last until Mashiach. Right? Don't we see that? Rome is the Western world, which is very divided. The left side of the Western world is dead against us, right? And we have, Persia, which is, Iran, the Shiite Muslims, and they're both currently ruled by Amalek, right? Rashis Goyim Amalek, he's the head of all nations, we've discussed. So it's going to be until Mashiach comes. But amazing about Poras in particular, that what Poras, right, Persia, Iran, once we paid for is they made gesharim, they made bridges. So now Chazal at the time, Beruach Kacham saw bridges, they just thought infrastructure. And I said, Chazal just said gesharim, they didn't get into, they'll say milchamos, they make a lot of war, right? And they want to get paid for that because ultimately Hashem only gains at the end. Everyone's just a pawn of Hashem, so want to get. And Hashem said, "But you didn't do it for me; you did it for yourself." But they make buchas, but they make gesharim, And I said already 20 years ago, right, even before the open Biden border, right, that they're infiltrating. They make bridges. They try to infiltrate, as they've infiltrated Europe and they've infiltrated here. I think the gesharim, was not can be understood now. Chazal saw just in general, Beruach Kacham Gesharim, which perhaps for many centuries was, assumed to be that they built infrastructure, just like Rome built markets. They built, and that Pashut Pshat might be true also. But I say that it's mutter to see that, history unlocks some secrets. And, and I think Gesharim means, bridges, as in, they infiltrated other nations. They traveled, they migrated, built bridges to infiltrate a lot of cultures, and there's sleeper cells everywhere. It's a big pachat. Besides the fact that, we don't know what they have in their arsenal. There's a lot to daven for, and how we're not safe even here in America, let alone we should feel terrible, that my children, grandchildren, and probably many of others, everyone, friends and relatives, the Yoshvei Eretz HaKodesh, that Shushan Purim was made for the covet of Yerushalayim, that Eretz Yisrael was chariv at that time, they're going to be spending it in shelters, right? We should feel very bad about that alone, just let alone, but it's a very big sakana. It's a very big sakana, and I think it's a big nisayon Hashem is giving us, that it broke out now as we already feel the simcha of Purim, we're already preparing for Purim, which could be tremendous hesach hadas, from doing tshuva. The aspect of divrei hatzamos v'za'akosam that's coming up tomorrow in Taanis Esther, right? It could just be so distracted because we're preparing for Purim and we don't want to mar the simcha of Purim that we're feeling already. It's a big nisayon. And I said to a very dear friend that visited me on Shabbos afternoon that it is my understanding, based on what I saw in Svarim, that by Chorban Abayis, which, by the way, initially, if you read Josephus, there are a lot of successful skirmishes. And by the Bar Kokhba revolt, a lot of successful skirmishes at the beginning. So we can't get too high on the initial hatzlacha of Tzahal and the American army, it's not over yet, and things could go south. Hashem, you're right. I don't want to be potech peh, right? We have to be very vigilant and do tshuva shlema, But by Chorban Abayis, we find a whole slew of agaritas, one after the other, that people are just not thinking straight, and not like Marta Bar Baisus. They want to say they don't have the best bread. All right, get me the second best bread. They don't have second. Like, why you just didn't understand the severity of the situation. Grab whatever you can grab, right? Her mind wasn't working. The mind of her servant that she sent out wasn't working either, right? And Chazal seemed to say it about Gedolei Olam. The mind, Yochanan ben Zakkai is criticized, once or twice, according to some Manda Amrim, about how he handled with Aspasianus. He could have said better. He could have asked for more. Chaim ben Avkulas, according to Anvitanuso, most Mefarshim understand it as a condemnation that Anvitanuso echriva es beisedu v'sarchei lidu ben umos, right? It was pikuach nefesh, right? So what? So you don't kill Bar Kamsa because you don't want to say, you don't want to teach a bad lesson that matamum bakachim, is chayiv misa because you're not the most partial. I know there's drushim and of course the drushim are emes also that we had. Kodesh was geyser gzeira and Schar ben Avkulas was his kli, his vehicle to bring about the gzeira. That says something about him, that his mind was manipulated by higher power. But the partial shot is he didn't think it through, right? It's pikuach nefesh. Of course, you kill Bar Kamsa, and you explain to people later that it wasn't because it was chayiv misa for being matum and kachim, right? You'll be makav and explain to people later that it's pikuach nefesh. Okay, all right, you understand, right? There's a common denominator, right? And for a lesson, again, not any criticism of Schar ben Avkulas, it was his mind was on. In his case, his mind was on override. Let's say Al Pidrush, his mind was being overridden by higher programming, and that's Al Pidrush, Al Pipshat, whatever, and then Al Pipshat's the same as Martuba Spices, and the Rav Yochanan says Meshiv Chachayim Achar V'Data Misachel, and the Pshat is like this, after the Gzeira is issued, right? You don't deserve to think clearly, right? The mind intuitively ties into the cosmic energy and was Kfar Nigzor Gzeira, so the mind goes along with it. And it takes a lot of struggle to push against that trend and think through it, which is what we're going to talk about. Takes a lot of, gevura, the mind taps into the cosmic energy and, goes with the flow, the cosmic ebb and kfar nigzor gzeira. And you understand why this is bedin, because you should have done your thinking before nigzor gzeira. You should have thought things. I mean, of course, not blaming Yochanan ben Zakkai per se, not Schar ben Avkulas, and not even Marta Bas Baisus per se. They were just symptoms of the problem that Am Yisrael wasn't thinking before Nigzor Gzeira. So after Nigzor Gzeira, don't deserve to have it so easy to think through, right? And I do fear that any complacency right now because Purim is coming, Chas v'shalom could be a terrible part of chas v'sholom, a siman, far nigzor gzeira, and then we have to definitely work hard against the flow, and put ourselves in a introspective mood, and put ourselves into a state of cheshbon hanefesh, and to kiru levavchem al bigdeichem, right? Rip ourselves apart, right? And we have tomorrow to do it. I understand the Gdom Nertzol said, to lay it on thick tomorrow with Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim and some Tehillim, because why not? That we have the ammunition of a Taanis tzibur. Let's use it. Let's just put all effort, ride that wave and do it right, which means, of course, get all your shopping and shachmaras making out of the way today. So you just pour it on tomorrow. Just be a day of tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. Tshuva, tefillah, kipshuto, tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, machzis hashekel, and setting aside even more matnos evyonim, Yeah. I want to point out a trend, okay, that actually starts with Shabbos Zachar 6 years ago, okay? It was Shabbos Zachar 2020, and I had a scholar in residence in Plano, Texas, Rabbi Zaykon's shul, and that was it. They announced the virus. Now, at the time, these we didn't know. No one knew what to do about this. So what happened in shul? Just stop. No one. It was talking about the coronavirus. So it was no one knew what to do. So no one shook hands. So and they did something weird. And when you want to say good shots, you kick them and you do a shoe kick. You kick your shoe to his shoe. So, but we had communal meals. We sat nose to nose. We just didn't know. We just didn't know what to do. So no handshakes, but we did everything else. And Baruch Hashem, as far as I know, everyone came out okay from that particular encounter. But it started Taanis Esther, went through Purim, and we know what happened. Finally the message got through after Purim, and there was this terrible shutdown. But look at this, during Adar, and not just Adar, when we start feeling the aura of Purim, it struck, which would be a time of victory, a time where we're machniah the sitra achra. And it went straight through Pesach, which is why Rashi says, because it ushers in Purim and Pesach. It's all a hemshah. And during this tkufa, Corona hit. Okay. And then a few months later, so we go through the Omer after Pesach, and we're still with the Corona. It just didn't end, right? We weren't zocha to Gzera Avida the Butler so quickly. Right? And then Shavuos time, and we had the George Floyd thing. Right, he got killed already after Rosh Chodesh Sivan, when people are already taking haircuts, and if you keep the second Omer, you're out of it already, right? The dinim are nahefach l'rachamim, and by Shavuos the riots started, right? That days of simcha and of dinim turning to rachamim were reversed. Come next year, 2021. And amongst, I'm sure there's plenty of stuff I'm forgetting about. But there's one thing I'll never forget, and it moved me so much I rushed to put out a sefer. I felt there had to be a response, right? And that is, Lag BaOmer, Tafshin Pei Aleph, Lag BaOmer 2021. What happened in Miron? 45 people were killed, trampled, right? On Lag BaOmer, the day where Dinim turned to Rachamim, when Rabbi Kiva's Talmidim stopped dying, on Lag BaOmer, in Miron. On Lag BaOmer, in Miron. 45 people. That's like most terror attacks, Chas should never be, not even that much, Right? And at the time, I cried out, that we have to do tshuva, this we cannot, but couldn't get anything done. Because it's still Corona. We could have a kinus tshuva. It's still Corona, but yada, right? So what happened afterwards? Shavuos time, which is supposed to be even more dinim turning to rachamim. There was another war that broke out in Gaza. Now, I'm sure plenty of bad stuff happened at what should be good times in 2022, but I don't remember the date when the Russia-Ukraine war opened up. You tell me, but Mazamishaneh, because it all pales in comparison to what happened in 2023, shortly afterwards, Tavshin Pei Dalet. Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres, which is the day where all the dinim are over. We have, even with this man of the Simcha of Sukkot, we still have the Hoshanas in the background until we have Hoshana Rabbah, where we know all the dinim are behind us, and the goyim that came to Yerushalayim all go home, right? It's just, and the Shivim Parim connection was, that's finished because we're done with them. We defeated them. And it's just the day of us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu alone, right? Just us and him alone, right? So all the dinim are over. It's the day of, that's when October 7th happened. The biggest slap in the face. I don't have this koch to scream about it anymore. That it was the biggest slap that year. That Rosh Hashanah was nothing that year. The Yom Kippur was nothing. The Hoshana Rabbah was nothing. Right? Big slap in the face, So, and it's still going on. Right? It's not over. The 20-point plan has not been fully implemented. Hamas hasn't disarmed. Right? No, and and now we have this. We feel the awe of Purim, and here, this happens. A lesson to learn that, we have these special times, right, where dinim turn to rachamim, and it's still true, despite the current situation. Still, nonetheless, cosmically, things are different, and that's why we have to celebrate the Chag, right? But it's not the Iker Koveya in destiny. The Iker Koveya in destiny is Hakol Lefi Rov HaMaisa, right? Good times don't give you a free ride, right? Good times where dinim are meant to turn to rachamim don't give you no free lunch there. It's all true, and it's, and if you're doing good, so you ride the wave, and it's even better, right? But the good times don't override Hakol Lefi Rov HaMaisa, the responsibility for our actions. And Rebbe sometimes just has to stick it to us, right? Don't rely on what you do right. What you do right, you do right. But it's not good enough. It's not good enough, right? We have to stop with the low expectations, which we're going to talk more about. So I want to unburden myself, and I say again, you're not interested in hearing from me, please click off. I didn't mean this video for you. You're not interested in hearing any type of critique, which by the way, I'm critiquing myself more than anybody else. I'm the biggest sinner, okay? I'm the biggest sinner, okay? Take it as self-critique, okay? When I say I'm critiquing Klal, so I'm a member of Klal also, right? You don't want to hear any critique, just please click off. I'm not speaking to you. I'm speaking to the 1 out of 1,000, right? Right? But, it is time, right, to really wake up. Now, Purim is a day of La'asid Lavo, right? We have, Milchama Hashem Ba'amalek Midor Dor, right? And right now we're up against Amalek. Shiite Muslims are Amalek. Amalek is a shapeshifter, and that's why it's Milchama Midor Dor. If he inhabited the head of that nation, the virus moves on to a new host. He's a mind virus. So we speak about this in my sefer, Nes B'Shushan, which by the way is Gematria Evan Shasiya. But I chose the name for more, as I say in the book, besides Nes B'Shushan, but also Lili Nishmas Yaakov ben Shushan, who died on Shushan Purim, as I write Nakdama, but Nes B'Shushan is Gematria Evan Shasiya. Muhammad Hashem Ba'amalek Dor, he's a mind virus, right? And that's why it's there in every generation, even though the nations have changed and the boundaries have changed. It's not the same people, right? So the Shiva Umos are extinct, but not Amalek, right? Right? He's a shapeshifter, but he could occupy opposing hosts. And now the big chiddush of our days is they can occupy the bodies of 2 opposing hosts. and unite them against, in a union that makes no sense, right? Against Am Yisrael and against the Torah, right? Amazing thing, the liberal leftists who are queer and transgender and every novella that in a Shiite country gets you killed on the spot. And they're in bed, Bibi said, but I don't think he invented, that queers for Palestine makes about as much sense as chicken for KFC. Right? Yeah. And they're in it. And they're in it, They're in it together. Right? An amazing thing. Amalek has really upped this game that he can occupy two hosts, right? The minds of two hosts that simultaneously doesn't have to be constricted to one host, and bring them together. They make achdus over just destroying Am Yisrael, destroying the Torah, and destroying anything that's good. Amazing. So we're up against Amalek, right? That's and so apropos to Purim. And it's Amalek because when people do things, that they make a holy cause out of their their murderous and self-destructive tendencies. That's Amalek. Other nations just act out of taiva. Amalek doesn't act out of taiva. Amalek's the guy who jumps into the boiling bath, even though it scalds him, to make a point, to cool it down for everyone else. The Shiites, to them, the highest honor is to commit suicide. They martyr their own people and use them as human shields. And the leftists also do tremendous self-destructive things, particularly to America, right? To America, to the well-being of any American-born citizen or legal citizen here. It's terribly self-destructive stuff, right? There's some higher cause. What's the higher cause? The Sitra Achra, really, So we're in Amalek right now. We're in Milchemes Amalek. And Purim is even though Milchem Hashem b'Amalek midor dor, Purim is a little bit of the or of L'Asid Lavo, of the day after, right? That's V'noach Barba. So we don't celebrate the day we actually fought. That's the 13th, and that's Taanis Esther. We celebrate the day after. So Purim is a little bit of or from the future, to draw strength from the glorious future to import it. Now, the difference between Purim de Prozim and Purim de Mukafim is that Purim de Prozim is to import a little bit of light from the future. Purim de Mukafim, I don't want to get into this too deeply right now because I don't want, I'm not here to speak divrei machshava, I'm here to speak, kiru levavchem al bigdeichem is what I'm here to speak about, right? And if you can't handle it, get out now. Get out now. You're serious, you're a hater, you're crazy. Get out now. Get out now. Okay, but just to finish the thought, Purim de Prozim is to bring a little bit of the or from the future into the present, to draw strength. Purim de Mukafim is to actually live in the future. Inasin gam mochar la Yehudim, right? Besod mochar l'kabel scharim. What was Yerushalmi say? To give cover to Eretz Yisrael that was chorev, to pretend as if the walls of Yerushalayim are rebuilt. That's why it's so Zman says, Purim de Prozim is to import the light of the future into the present, an infusion. Purim de Mukafim is to actually live in the world of tomorrow. So that's as if the walls, the Gidro Shel Olam that the Nachash broke, Ani Paratzi Gidrom, which is Marumas in the Chomas Yerushalayim, have been restored. That's the Inyan, right? Dok v'tishkach, right? And I think we have a piece on it in our Sefer, right? So, to be worthy of Purim, we really have to want to make the entire tikkun not just be a little bit better. But here's another thing. Being a little bit better doesn't help with Amalek. And this, is articulated very nicely in the Chemdas Hayamim, in his piece on Shabbos Zachar. I read it just yesterday. He says, by our contention with all the other nations, that we defeated them, and it doesn't go me door to door. We're done with the Yevonim. We're done with the Mitzrim. We're over with it, and we just, and we celebrate those chagim because we defeated their klipa, right? By Amalek, Purim is a big chiddush. Despite the fact we haven't defeated their klipa yet, we still celebrate. It's a nifla moed because it's an import from the future, right? Import from future, and if you live in Yerushalayim, you can live in the future, for 24 hours. Nifla. Right? It's a holiday. That's right. So that, lost love, all the modest are going to be bato, not Yemei Purim. And according to other Lashinus, Yom Kippur, right? Which we're not going to talk about that right now, right? But it's the aura of the future, right? So, to really be worthy of Purim, right? We should want to do the whole tikkun. But not only that, because it's the aura of the future, but it's the point I'm making, what the Hamd Sayyam says, Davar Niflamot. By the other nations, why are we zocher to be over with them? Because all we need to do is be better than them. That's all. We just need to have more schuyot than them. They got power from our Averis. Once we do tshuva and we're just better than them, and we've done enough tshuva that their power that they got from our Averis has been, mitigated, just mitigated to the point that we are better than them. Boom. Victory. It's just about being better than them. And that's good enough, as far as them. Amalek is connected the Sitra Achra Mamish. It is the nation that's connected the essence of evil. It's connected the Yetzer Hara per se. So long as the Yetzer Hara exists, so you're a little bit better, but you still have Yetzer Hara. So Amalek's still there. Amalek is still there until we get rid of all the Yetzer Hara. Until we get it all. That's what we read yesterday. All our enemies, which also refer to our spiritual enemies. After we're ready to have when he is the last holdout, literally it's just him. Then Timcha Zecher Amalek, right? As long as there's still Taiva, as long as there's still Apikorsus, as long as there's bad midas, he's got a foothold. By him, it's all or nothing, because he is keneged the Sitra Achra per se. So you leave room for the Sitra Achra, because there are midas you're not willing to confront, right? You leave room for the Sitra Achra, because you could be moicha on something that's going wrong and you're not. You leave room for evil, so Amalek's still there. There's no getting rid of him until Sof Kol Adoros, when all forms of Ra have been defeated. And then he's just the last holdout. Then we can take him down. So we have plenty of Taivas left, and he'll still be around. Right? So maybe to be also, aside from the Purim is the Chag of Lasid Level, right? But to really do Milchemes Amalek and with the Kavanah to win, well, we have to look to fix everything. Fix everything. And in the days of Mordechai and Esther, Kimu v'Kibla Yehudim, they were Rimakabel Ter Hadar Kiblu Me'achashverosh, Kimu Masha Kiblu Klar. They were not to be better, like they're in Geula. They were makabel themselves all of Torah b'shleimus to be taken to him, kachim, right? There was they're makabel on themselves that we gotta build the Beis Hamikdash, and that's why it's so very interesting. It's not for nothing that when Haman came to pick up Mordechai with the ride, he was learning with his Talmidim the halachas of the Kmitza for the Omer, and also the 7 advisors of Achashverosh. In them, it's Merumas, the Korbanos. What does that have to do? No, they were makabel on themselves, all Torah b'shleimus, mitzvahs that they can do, mitzvahs that they can't do. They wanted it all. It was a total tshuva shlema to correct everything, and even to be makabel that Riposh would just give us an opportunity to do those mitzvahs we can't do. It was all inclusive, and that's why they were zocha to a bechina of ha'arav mechias Amalek, because they were rimakabel kol Torah kula, not leaving anything. A determination to fix everything, not leaving anything unfixed. It was a determination, and Riboshim saw. Divrei Tzomos v'Zakasa, Kimu v'Kiblu, right? Meaning they didn't stop after Divrei Tzomos v'Zakasa. They and Riboshim knew Magi Mersh Achris that when they were Nosha, they were Mekimu v'Kiblu, right? They didn't stop after they were relieved. It was a total Kabbalah of Kol Torah Kula, right? Everything, to do everything right, right? And I think so we have to do. We have to have I alluded to that we run on the politics and the policies of low expectations, right? And it's kiruv, chizuk, low expect, wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. Right? We'll be stuck here in Gullus as long as we excuse ourselves, say we're weak, whatever. It's not the answer. I'm going to say what the real answer is. It takes courage, it takes effort, right? From all of us. Right? but Azov Purim. There's Yerushalmi, right at the beginning of Yuma, right? Kol dor shelo nivne beis hamikdash biyamav kilu nechrava biyamav. Any generation that didn't see the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash in its day, it's as if it was destroyed in a day. It's as if you destroyed it. You, yes, you, me, okay, me, Yochanan Backhofer, right? I destroyed it, right? If I didn't see it rebuilt, I destroyed it. Right? Sounds very unfair, right? So Rav Shiva, Rav Yaakov Varmik, Zechron Livracha, right, explained Yerushalmi, very simple. Anything goes back to its natural equilibrium, right? And that's healing. So you get a stomach ache because the body's out of whack. It goes back to its natural equilibrium. You heal, right? The stomach ache passes, the headache passes, and even economic heavels and things. If they go out of whack, they go back to their natural state of equilibrium. Everything goes back to its natural state, right? There's nothing more natural than having a Beis HaMikdash on earth. Nothing more natural. It's natural to have a Beis HaMikdash, right? And it's natural to have Hashras HaShechina. It's natural that we should be Nevi'im as a result, because there's Shechina dwelling amongst us, right? Everyone from the Rambam through Rav Chaim Vital, So it's natural to be a Navi. It's part of being a Tzelem Elokim. Just our bad meat is corrupt. It's very natural to be a Navi, right? It's work, but it's natural. It's not supernatural. It's not a miracle, right? It's achievable. It's achievable, right? Even Bisman Hazeh, if you can't have full-blown Nevuah because of the Hester bottom, you could have Ruach HaKodesh. Bisman Hazeh, yes. Even Bisman Hazeh. Chaim Vital said he did it. Gives you a book how to do it. And it just involves Tikkun Amidas mostly, the Sharei Kedusha. It's what Hasidus was really about, and we'll talk about that, about the trans-Hasidic cults that are really a big machala, right? We'll get to it, right? But real Hasidus was about putting demands to get back to Ruach HaKodesh, through real work, right? Real work, heavy work. It was a movement for excellence, not being, drunken fressers. That's what Hasidus was supposed to be. When it wasn't working out already 100 years ago, Naftali Rofshitzer and his Talmud Divrei Chaim thought they should just close it down. They thought it was good to keep it going anyway. And it was, for other reasons that I'm not going to get into, not for the trans-Hasidic cult. Why do I call it trans-Hasidic? I don't call it neo-Hasidic, because it's all delusion. If those guys are from the Chevrai Kadisha of the Besh, then I'm a woman, okay? It's total delusion, right? And we'll get to that. But it is natural through the hard work to be Nevi'im. It is natural to have a Beis HaMikdash on earth. It's Geula, and it is Yisod that the Maharal talks about also. Geula is a natural state of the world. The world should be optimal with world peace, and Hashras HaShechina and Yisrael, who are the Tachlis Abriya, should be the ones on top. It's all natural. So why isn't it happening? Why isn't the world, it's 2,000 years, and the world is not being restored to its equilibrium? It's programming. It's natural programming. Obviously, we must be exerting force, equivalent to being machriv the bias, because we wouldn't be exerting that type of negative force of Chorban bias proportions. Basically, it should have come back already. Right? The Gemara already said, Kfar kolu kol akitzim, right? All the ends have already passed. It's just our avers, just because we're not doing tshuva. Right? Kfar kolu kol akitzim, the Geula should have come already years ago. Right? It's about time we take responsibility. Now, so let me tell you something from the Alter of Navardik. All right, he gives a mashal, talking about the games that we play with cheshbon. Well, but I checked. I'm looking into my heart. Yeah, I'm looking. I don't see. I'm honestly fixing whatever I find. Okay. So the Alter Navark says that in Russia, in his day, they had their type of prohibition. Only the government should control the sale of alcohol. So people made their, bathtub gin, whatever you call that stuff. They had their meth labs, whatever, their underground, alcohol production. So, one guy has a great geschäft going, making his homemade stuff, and someone squealed on him. So a police officer, inspector, comes to his door, says, okay, I understand that there's an illegal distillery here. He says, of course, I'm very loyal to Mother Russia. No, I would never do that. Not only is there not one here, I'm going to help you search. I'm going to help you search my premises, right? And he takes them to the attic, and he takes them to the basement. He opens up trap doors and shows him hidden caverns that the cop would have never found himself, right? And there's nothing there, right? Takes him to the backyard, takes him, where some fake grass lifts it up, and takes him to all these hidden chambers. There's nothing there. Hidden chambers that the cop would have never found himself, right? And the cop's amazed, Mother Russia needs more good citizens like you, comrade, right? So he hands the cop his coat. Cop leaves. He just moves the coat cupboard aside, goes into his distillery. Right? Checked everywhere except there, says the Novardiker, right? We play that same game with ourselves. We play these mind games ourselves. I'm doing cheshbon hanefesh. I'm doing cheshbon. Oh, I'm looking into myself, my tefillah, my tzedakah, my lashon hara. The way I interpret the laws of the lashon hara, of course, right? That's another thing. It's litoelis, right? Okay, so I didn't find anything. I'm looking. I didn't find. You opened up all the chambers of the heart, except the one that you're too scared to open. Right? But you put yourself to sleep because you did all these checking in those chambers you have the courage to open. You exhaust yourself opening up all those chambers where you're not afraid what you find there. And with that exhaustion, you potter yourself from opening the one you're afraid to open. This is what we need right now. Right? We need at this time, we're in the greatest danger that since the Holocaust, we don't know what Iran has, right? Let's not be, and they're willing to die. They're Amalek. They're willing to die, to do whatever damage they can. And they have proxies, and they have sleeper cells, and the American left, the leftists, Europe and America, all in bed with them. This is a big sakana. But of course, it has the potential. If we do tshuva shlema, we could convert this into the Geula shlema, right? Of course, that's always the way it is. Always meruba mida tova. If God forbid there's a sakana of losing heart, then meruba mida tova, koshkein, meruba mida tova, right? But we have to have the courage. And that's, again, if you have no courage, please leave the video now. Please, I didn't ask you to watch this, right? Because lo es lachashos, not a time for political correctness, not a time for being nice, right? So get out of the video right now, right? I'm speaking to that 1 out of 1,000. Ben Yakir Li Ephraim. The rest of you, please. To the Ribor Shalom, the Ben Yakir Li Ephraim is enough. Kolam lo nivra letzavos lezeh. Okay? Yeah. Internalize that. Oh yeah. Let's talk about something right now. Yeah. Right? About loving Hashem. Loving it. Love Hashem, or whatever. Hashtag. Right? Okay. Right? You love someone. You care about them. And you want what they want. And if they're in pain, you're in pain. Right? That is to love. And that's called to be close. You feel their pain. Right? Is the Rebbe Shalom happy? When the Gemara Bracha says, "Thou call Mishra Shoy Kari Oilich Raftis Basi Visaraftis Echoli Viglisi Pada Beta Umois." Right? Rebosham's miserable that we're not Nevi'im and that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash and that's most of Am Yisrael is not in Makayim Torah and mitzvahs. No. Where's your feeling his pain? You walk around with a stupid smile on your face all day. Gotta be besimcha. Right? And you make another stupid video when all this is Osir al Pi Halacha, because of Chorban Abayis, we're not supposed to be perpetually intoxicated with simcha because he's not happy. Right? There's Mamsha Pirza, chi wawa is not shiros for sishbachos that you can rely on that riff. Okay? Which by the way, Moshe Feinstein, you like his heter for OUD, right? Right? You like his OUD, right? He paskins like the Rambam and Rashi that all musical instruments are osir. You only do a cappella, only, right? He doesn't pass like Tosus, so far I remember, right? What is this? Who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? You and God are like this. Who are you kidding? Right? When he is upset that we are in the matzah, that we're not Nevi'im and we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, right? He's miserable, right? Chazal say that, right? The Mistarim Tivke Nafshi, right? He's matzah to the most to the Yom HaGadol every single day, right? Do you do Tikkun Chatzos, right? Do you feel his pain? You love him. Do you feel his pain? Do you feel his disappointment? Right? Cut the garbage. So, so we have to, be very honest, and not live in delusions. Purim is not a day of delusion. Purim is a day of reality. The chiddush of Purim is to see reality even in Hester Panim, where the emes is obscured, right? To break through, right? To break through the Hester Panim, not a day to enjoy Hester Panim and go deeper into delusions. And it's not, it's the day of reality check, of seeing the emes, even in the choshech, importing the truth of the future, the gilui of the lassid level, right? Importing it into the hoive. Yes, Yisoid Abba, bring it in there. I know about these things also, Yes, that's what it is. It's about reality and the hachana for Purim. The hachana for Purim is Taanis, Esther. You can only get into this avodah of seeing the or within the choshech, right? Right? The or even within the malchus, that is a spakla or nahara, less than garma klum. Yeah, I know, right? The or of Torah Shabbat Peh, right? You only zocha to that if you go through a Taanis Esther like you're supposed to, and you purify yourself, and you do milchemes like you do milchemes hayetzer, right? Let's talk about Hasidus a little bit, which I dabble plenty. Well, let's be magdim with a nice story. Let's reduce the tension a little bit. A beautiful story from Purim from quite a few years ago. I think it might have been my first year in Eretz Yisrael, and I was stone drunk. Hard to believe, I know. Me drink, right? Never, right? Yeah, you learned something new about me. So I can't even remember whose house I was in, right? But a guy walks in full shmoina begodim, Rebbe Shulavush, and it was clear that he's Hasidic, year round, even though he's like overdoing it a little bit with covered Purim. And it was Itchy Lowenbraun, Zichron Levracha. Itchy Lowenbraun, that legendary, he's a Eretz Yisrael alumnus himself, much older than me. I was friends with his son Yossi. Anyways, it's a Chilo and Brown, a legendary leader of NCSY in that region, whatever the region that Baltimore's a part of. Big NCSY guy, Itchy. All right, Itchy Lowenbrown, anyone from NCSY knows this guy's legendary. Rabim Heshiv Me'ovan, great guy. Did a lot of good, and let this story be Lili Nishmasa. So anyway, he was obviously an easy target for a drunk bacher like myself. See a guy like, full of regalia like that. So, the Streimel and a Rebbe Shebekisha, and okay. So obviously went over to him to, chepper him a little bit. And I don't know how we got into it, but as drunk as I was, he told me a story that penetrated my heart. And it stuck with me, it pierced me through all the layers of alcohol, right? And stuck with me, and it's something very important to say right now. He said that, when he first came to Ner Yisrael, so those in the days of the great Rav David Kronglass, the legendary Mashgiach of Ner Yisrael was a mirror, from Mir, and on paper, a very big misnagin, a real litvak, an Altamira, and he was tough. And he was a real Baal Musar in these, though that 10 yards of the stereotypical Litvisher Baal Musar, disciplinarian, right? Anyway, David Kronga. So, people warned Lowenbrown, he was a Hasidic Shabbat, he was always Hasidic. He was somehow, the Lowenbrowns and the Twerskis are somehow one family, intermarried. I don't remember offhand the Yichus, right? So he was always Hasidic, as a Hasidic Bacher, comes to Ner Yisrael with real, Litvisher place. And he's going to be in the shir of David Kronglass, stereotypical misnagin, right? So, David Kronglass called him over, after shir, sit down, Lowenbrown. I don't know what they told you about me. He says, they'll tell you, I'm a big messiah, this, Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a very big Gvir. And he was super rich. He was a big machnis orchim, right? So, and Oni would come, he needs a meal. They said, listen, what do you want to eat? Milchiks or fleishiks, whatever you want, right? You want fleishiks, you go to the kitchen on the left. That's the fleishik kitchen. It's steak and it's veal and, the best fleishiks, right? You want milchiks, go to the kitchen on the other side. That's the milk kitchen, and you get, whatever. All that stuff with Italian names that they grossly overcharge for in the dairy restaurants, right? That stuff, right? You can't even pronounce it, all that stuff. The only thing I know about is that's very expensive, right? So all that stuff, that's if you want. Okay, he started losing money. All right, he still wants to keep his Hachrosas Orchim open. Okay, so you come, you want fleishiks, go to the fleishik kitchen, you'll get hamburgers. All right. You want milchiks, you go there, you get pizza and calzones, whatever. Yeah, good. Loses even more money. All right. Okay, you want fleishiks, right? You get regular broiled chicken. You want milchiks, you get mac and cheese. Lost even more money. You want fleishiks? Go to that kitchen. You'll get potatoes that were boiled in what used to be a fleishik pot. You want milchiks? You go to that kitchen, and you'll get potatoes boiled in what used to be a milchik pot. Okay? He said, don't you get it, Lowenbrown? Don't you get it? Well, as if you're Hasidic, you're a kilo from the Baal Shem Tov, and I'm kilo from the Goyin. We're all just boiled potatoes. A little reality check, right? That, I've seen some debate going on. We're going to some stupid animated videos. All stupid. Kind of elu ve'elu. Elu ve'elu divrei shtusim va'avolim. Okay? But like talking about, we're the Hasidim, we're the lit. That's serious delusion. That is serious delusion. All right? Right? We said before, Hasidus was a move that to revitalize excellence, revitalize, with hard work, tikkun amidus, right? Hashras hashchina, attaining nevuah, and ultimately to bring the Geula. That's what it was meant to be. Hell, let's learn some Chassidus right now. See what it is. Tell me, is there anyone that to be a bigger authority on Chassidus than the Rebbe Ramelech? Right? He's the one, according to Kimat, all branches of Chassidus or Maskim. After the Ptira of the Maggid, it was him. It's Baal Shem Tov Maggid, then there's the Rebbe Ramelech. Rove branch of Chassidus, Maskim. And even the ones that think that it went to Reb Aaron Karliner, the Karliner says, or Chabad says went to the Baal Tanya, let's say, they still hold the Rebbe Ramelech, There's a man who Chassidus, I think, right? So he has his Setol cotton, right? Right? He has his Setol cotton, right? That he wants every Jew to read, every Jew, any follower of his to read. Let's read it. Only 3 sifim. From Setol cotton. And Mizeh Takish V'Tadun, okay? Anytime that you're just not learning, you should always be learning, right? Anytime you're poni min Torah, that's starting point, right? Anytime you're actually ponui min Torah, you should always be osik in Torah. But anytime you're actually ponui min Torah, which when you're sitting alone because you don't have a sefer, or you're asleep, you're trying to fall asleep, you haven't fallen asleep yet. Right? You haven't fallen asleep yet. You're mahara b'mitzvah sasei shusha v'ikdashi b'soch b'nei so. Think about the mitzvah v'ikdashi b'soch b'nei so of dying al kiddush Hashem. Right? V'yidame b'nafsho v'yitzayer b'machshavto. And imagine, right? Imagine kilu eish gedola v'noira bar lefanav ad lev hashram. You have this huge furnace burning, huge fire, huge bonfire burning all the way to the highest places in heaven. And he, to be Mekadosh Shem Shemaim, he breaks his nature of self-preservation, right? He throws himself into the fire to be burned out, Kiddush Hashem. That's what you should do anytime that you're not learning, okay? You hear what we're saying over here, right? So yeah, okay, this is what you do if you can't fall asleep. This is what you do when you're not learning, okay? And according to get schar if you're get schar mitzvah. Yeah, okay, that's enough. That's we're only gonna do 3. We're only gonna do 3, okay? Bays. And you should have this kavanah also, even if you're engaged in Kriya Shema, because you have to become serious, and also the first bracha of Shmona Esrei, about being burnt alive, out Kiddush Hashem, right? Add on to it, let's dramatize it a little bit more, right? If they'll be tortured by all the nations of the world, they'll be beat up on you, and they are flaying your skin off your flesh, right? To deny HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yizbo kol ha'yisurim v'lo yodam. You're willing to suffer. You imagine suffering all that pain, but you're not going to blaspheme, right? You're not going to, right? And you should imagine they're doing this to you. That's called to be Yotze Kriya Shema and Tefillah. That's called, right? Not shuckling your tuchas at the Aron Kodesh. That's called to be Yotze Kriya Shema. That's what he says. Okay, it's Chassidus, right? Okay, which I'm all in favor of this, right? I just don't like when people lie about it, right? Say, but yeah. Okay. Oh, but it gets better. Yeah. You want Chassidus, right? Let's do it. Kirvas Elokim. Yeah, listen to Gimel, and we'll stop after Gimel. I think you'll have had enough. Okay? Gimel. Gam b'shas achila v'zivuk, you're eating or you're having intercourse with your wife, right? Yechaved kada, at that time also have the same thing in mind. Now, if you start feeling any physical pleasure, now, so don't enjoy the physical pleasure, as we'll explain why in a second. Don't enjoy it, right? Start thinking this idea of being burnt alive, flayed al kiddush Hashem, right? V'tekev mumiyad yomar fivu vavo, and you should immediately say it. Say it right there on the spot, right? Now, I would rather have the tanuk. Oh, this is what it means. It's geschmack to be a yid. It's geschmack to be a yid is to die al kiddush Hashem, to be meiser nefesh everything, to fight for him, which of course involves milchemes hayetzer. Just do mitzvahs doesn't cut it. It's like don't do averos, right? Right? And you say, Hashem, I'd much rather the pleasure, and that's the geschmack to be a yid, a sense of mission, to mekadesh shmo barabim, right? I'd rather have that than this taste in my mouth or this intercourse, right? Because that physical pleasure is bad. It's from the mashcha de chavya. It's from the snake skins, from the zuma that the nochash was matil and chava. You don't want physical pleasure. Physical pleasure comes from the sitra achra. You don't want physical pleasure, right? Kach yomar, right? And that's what you should say. If Ra'ila davar, shosei lo time simcha b'sias mitzvah seich v'gdash v'ofan now, shulchot v'so rotzchim b'emtza achil v'ziv v'glaso v'tzim v'koshim v'samech v'satzmi v'knesh Hashem yisbarach yosem v'atar gashma. And you know what? To certain Ribono, I'm serious about this. So right now, in the middle of my eating, in the middle of my fressing, in my drinking, in the middle of my intercourse, right? I would much rather that they grab me right now. The bandits grab me and beat me up and kill me. Al kiddush Hashem. I would enjoy that more than this, fressing. Yeah. Because physical pleasure is mine. You don't want to enjoy that. You want to immediately obstruct feeling physical pleasure with these thoughts of v'nikdashti b'soch b'nei Yisrael. You don't want to feel the mashcha chavya. Right? And don't be delusional. Don't be delusional. Right? V'yois achizar she'doiver emes b'levavo. V'shi'az b'shas maise takua al luach libo b'toch yispiriv zalev gov v'lo yishate atzmo. You got to be sincere. Don't fool yourself. Leos kegoinev das el yoina. Right? To be as if, wait, you're going to fool God? Don't fool yourself. Certainly don't try to fool God. He doesn't buy it. It's just 3 sifim. One chassidus. You should want chassidus. The real thing. Not what these phonies are telling you. Not what these trans-chassidic bozos. Shelo koru v'lo shinu v'lo shimshu talmidei chachamim. Half quotes from the Arizal, but only half quotes. And the rest is all shtusim v'abolim, or shkorim gemurim, Oh man, what they did to the Ishbitzer, right? Which I have a lot to say about that. What they did to the Kormarna, right? How should I say, Right away. Should learn some Tanya. Try to get to the Igeres HaTshuva and the Igeres HaKodesh. See what Chassidus really is, and the demands, and the Taanis, and the Inuyim, what you have to be willing to do. Oh, Kormarna, right? I told her one of these bozos, learns Kormarna, right? So learn the Sumer Abastov, where it all came from. First of all, it's the right thing to do because it's the Hakdama to get into Chassidus and see what the demands are of being Memait Betanug in everything. Don't enjoy your food. It's a distraction. It's Mashar. Don't enjoy your zivug. Wake up at Chatzos every night. Don't pass it up. You got to get up in the middle of the night to learn. That's Chassidus. Right, please. That's Chassidus. Not Chihuahua. That's Chassidus. Right? Enough. Right? But now we got to go, and if you're offended, good. I'm glad. But I warned you, okay? And please don't write me any hate mail. I didn't ask you to listen to this, okay? But now let's go to the yeshiva world, right? Because this is actually very interconnected. Because Imlo Akshav Emasai, right? When? Am Yisrael's out getting missiles thrown at them. When should we talk about this? When? No one knows how this is going to end. Right? So grow up. Right? Snowflakes ahois. I don't need you. I didn't ask you for to come here. I'm here for the 1 out of the 1,000. Really, go. And don't bother with the hate mail. I'll ignore it. Just go, right? I'm here for people who want to hear MS and don't want to walk around all their lives sleepwalking in a fool's dream of fake Kirvas Elokim, right? You go to Olam Haba, ask one of these trans Hasidic bozos, how do you sleep at night? You're being machshel people. So I'm a chazak. You tell them, sheker, they go to Olam Haba. They have no Olam Haba to go to. And because you're a machshel, you have no Olam Haba to give them. He didn't care. Just make you a good parnasa. Gets a lot of covet. It's fine. So does the Pope. All right? We said popularity is not a riot to anything in a world that's in the Gullus where Hester Purim reigns. Okay, but now we're going to go to the yeshiva world for a second. We're going to see it. We go first and foremost, they're directly linked because the trans Hasidic cults that are really, no one's turning over more in their grave than the Baal Shem Tov, right? These trans Hasidic cults, are very matzliach because the yeshiva world is failing miserably. And if also in the back and forth between, fighting over stupid animated videos, right? That's really the maso matan, and the yeshiva wronged me, and the yeshiva wronged me, and that's terrible. That's terrible. The yeshivas are not doing a good job. Okay. And let's just go right into it. I don't care. Any Rosh Yeshiva, come on, bring it on. I'll debate you. Any Rosh Yeshiva. Okay. Right. Right. Just put your art scroll aside and let's have a debate. Okay. And, and that's the starting point. Okay. Let me ask you, how is it, that, people, Rosh Hashem, I'm so Kedoshim, but I mean that. Right? And we pay a lot of money for tuition, right? Right? Yisrael Kedoshim, right? And pay a lot of money for tuition. It doesn't come easy. So a kid goes through K through 12, right? Right? Jewish education, right? Does the Israel thing, a few years based medrash, and maybe does Koilo a little bit, 1 or 2 years, the Israel thing on a parent's credit card. And after all that, he still needs an art scroll. All right. After all that, he doesn't know the Yud Gimel Ikrim about it. Try it. Test him. See if he knows Yud Gimel Ikrim. Let's not be Mavayish to Rosh Yeshiva. Ask him if they can, someone who works very high up in OU said he once fired Rosh Yeshiva on the Yud Gimel Ikrim. Most of them couldn't get past 8 of them. All right. It's a problem. All right. So after all that, what's stuck? And if they could really make a laning, they could, right? That they have no inclination to do so, to do the real work. That's a failure. So that's, aside from the fact that we have all these people that feel that they've been wronged and abused, that's a failure, right? But here's another thing, which is the most sensitive point. So if some trans Hasidic bozo, right, gets up and says that the Rashab said that, Pagama Bris makes a real chassid, which Rashab never said. I saw the sikha that he misquoted. He says quite the opposite. If you have to read what he actually said and also read the whole thing. And he's not going to argue on his great-great-grandfather, the Balatanya, who writes in the Igera Satshuva, right, how many Taanis and how you have to mitzvah yourself over Pagama Bris. Right? It's nonsense. Right? But he said that, B'fnei Am V'eda, of a crowd full of yeshiva-educated people. Nothing stuck from your yeshiva education that you understand that you're hearing sheker. How did nothing? It can't be true. You should know that. That much should have stuck. Right? Then the Torah of Rashbi, right? We don't handle Averis, right? You should have had enough yeshiva. So even if you never opened up a Zohar in your life, there's no book that puts the fear of God more. But it just can't be. Schar Rosh is one of Yud Gimel Ikrim, right? And I could first say it's a Leshem. I said, where's the Leshem? I showed him where the Leshem. The Leshem that you misquoted says the exact opposite. Yeah, everything gets its tikkun after Yisurim, Morim, V'koshim. Ask him, how do you sleep at night? Telling a person that Torah Rashbi don't handle it. How do you sleep at night? Yeah, after he has his tikkun, after Yisurim, Morim, V'koshim, he has so many Pokemon then. I think it's in Shar above, Dr. Shorim. My God. But you're yeshiva educated. Nothing stuck that you're hearing sheker? What's the matter? That's a failure. That's a severe failure. That's a severe indictment. People have no shikul adas, nothing stuck. You should know this just can't be true. Right? Nothing stuck. Right? A different bozo. Right? This one was neutralized by Hashem Yisborach already. Got up, and by his own admission, he only found that out this morning, that Binyamin, the Shevet Binyamin, right? The Av, the Shevet Binyamin Tzad, Binyamin Ben Yaakov, was a werewolf. Just read it that morning. And of course, it's his tale. Right? God forbid. Right? God forbid. It doesn't need, even though I checked, it's not in all the Kisvei Ad Rabbeinu Ephraim, and some Kisvei where it's in, it says things that are horrible. That he was very sick, and that's why Yaakov didn't want to send him to Mitzrayim. He had to be near his doctor, otherwise he'd turn into a wolf and act wolf-like. You understand that this can't be true. One of the Shiftei Ka, the one that Akash chose to put his Shechina there, if Rabbeinu Ephraim said he was saying it al derish drush, right? But you said it just can't be true. This is Teira. And I had to debate with people about it. The rabbi said, and yeah, nothing stuck from your yeshiva education. One, the Shiftei Ka cannot have been a horribly sick and deranged person, right? It's in a manuscript. So what? You ever hear Dead Sea Scrolls? Or there are alternate versions of the Sifrei Torah, right? There are alternate versions of Tanakh. There's like so many, that's what the Reform do. They find these old manuscripts and show the Torah got corrupted. Maybe it is the real Torah. I mean, you have a Messiah, please. So what if it's in an ancient manuscript, right? Where's your shikul hadas? You don't have any. That's a failure. Right? It's a failure. We're doing something very wrong if we have such an, educated yet ignorant population that if the guy speaks well, yeah, it sounds good to me. Where's your shikul hadas? Nothing stuck. Nothing stuck. So let me tell you something. And it's something which says Sifrei Chasidus, okay? Chovos Talmidim, words of my Rebbe, Yaakov, it's the best exposition of what the Baal Shem Tov is always about. Right? Those are something that should be learned, like from cover to cover. The demands, right? And not showing yourself any mercy and no self-delusion. And, right? He says two things that I'd like to, mention, right? First and foremost, right? There's a dirty word that should never be said and should never cross a person's lips, ever, ever. It's the biggest lie there ever was. Because no such thing. Right? A pashta yid. Pashta yid. Simple. No such thing as a pashta yid. Everyone has a neshama chatzuva mitachas kisei hakavod, higher than where the malachim want. Beside echos bekisei kvodi v'achslam tshuva. Right? We have a Torah that's even higher than that the malachim want for ourselves. We're packing heat. There is no such thing as a pashta yid. We are meant to be tzaddikim. We're all meant to be neviim. We're all meant to be balei midas tovas, right? Now, not in the same way, and that's another problem. The failure of the institution, cookie cutter education, and if it's too much for the guys who pay whole tuition, so we lower the standards, right? People have to learn differently, right? And that's what leadership is. Leadership is to make, yes, individualistic not policies that are good for most of the people most of the time. Leadership is to take care of everyone. What's my raya? Yivkar Hashem elokei ruchos ish ala eda v'lo te'eton ad Hashem kitzon she'en lo roeh. Moshe Rabbeinu asked for elokei ruchos to give it ish ala eda. What does Rashi say? Elokei ruchos lama ne'emar. Says Ribono, that shem partzei kachin Hashem. Everyone has their own mentality. Give them a leader that could go lefi das kol echad v'echad. There's Balei Mikra, Balei Mishnah, Balei Talmud. There are different, and these are not just different texts, they're just all the same stuff, just on different levels. No, They're entirely different headspaces. But the Machachim of today just don't know that. Mishnah, the Baalei Mishnah, is a different way of thinking. It's a different approach to Torah from the Baalei Talmud, right? The derech of the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam is Baalei Mishnah, Binazos. And the Rambam said it himself in that he gers from Pinchas Adayan. I don't expect anyone to know it because our school hasn't translated it yet, right? And the Rambam wrote the Mishnah Torah for every Jew, right? If people don't have a head for Talmud, the argumentation, it's a certain type of learning. Talmud is a certain type of headspace of being Maven Dormi Toch Davar and Yavin Achris Dorm Reishuso, as the Ram writes in Ilchstam Torah. Admittedly, that is relativistic. Everyone has to be Kfi Rochav Levavo, as the Rambam writes in Ilchstam Torah. We have in Shas, Tani Tana Kameh, right? The Tana learned in front of Tani Tana Kameh. Who are these people? And it was happening still in the days of the Gaonim, right? Tani Tana Kameh. And so the Gaonim write a letter, right? These were people, they weren't very good at Talmud, but they had good memories, they could memorize. And they knew all the Mishnais and Brayos, and they preserved a very, very valuable function, right? To preserve the Masorah. They knew all the Mishnais and all the Brayos. They weren't the best on comparing and contrasting them, but they retained them very well, right? That's Baalei Mishnah. That's the whole derech of the Rambam's Mishnah. Rambam's Mishnah, every Jew can know. He says, every Jew, read Tanakh, learn this. It's for every Jew. Right? Talmud is not equally for every Jew. Mishnah is, Mikra is, right? Right? There's another thing, right? What's the Rif? Right? The Rif, wrote the Rif that people should learn the Rif instead of Gemara. Really? Because Gemara is too hard for people. And it's also people are not going to, engage in Kachim Taras, If you're going to engage in the Huchs of the Mashiach, you can take it from the real stuff, okay? He didn't write on. And by the way, Chafetz Chaim wrote Rif, the Likutei Halachos, for all of Kachim, right? People still learn Rif, because maybe Talmud's too much. Every single Havamir, it's just the Ikar, and then with the Rif, you Yotze Yechi of Talmud, because you know the origins of Halacha, you see how the Halacha was derived. You learn Rif with Rambam together, it's a Torah Shlema, and learn the Likutei Halachos, Halavai Alai, right? What did people do? The Daf Yomi, the Daf. We're going to get to what the real machla of the door is. The trans-Hasidic people amplify the problem, but Art Scroll is guilty of it, and Daf Yomi's we're catering to a problem because that's the consumerism. It's what the public wants, right? But it's like the public wants poison also, right? So we're selling them what they want, not what they need, not what the machla of the door is, right? Right, but we could have, if we're willing to break up the yeshivas and not have 50 kids in a class, but give kids what they really need, we could have mitsuyonim, Baalei Mikra, Baalei Mishnah, Baalei Talmud, and some people less in the Mikra Mishnah Talmud and more in the Maisim Tovim, Askanas. There's so much. We could be a nation, Rak Am Chacham V'Novan Agoya Gadol Hazeh, to be the Yisrael Asher B'cha Espoyer. We just need the courage. It's inconvenient. It's not financially viable. It's plenty of money in Kleisar. It's more Orthodox money now than there ever has been ever since Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, it's baloney. There's a big wedding right now in Morocco, which I'm not criticizing, and I understand he did it l'shem shemaim to make these people give pikam v'kamet tzedakah. There's money in Kleisar. Please spare me. Right? It's not politically correct. People want to have big moisters. Big moisters aren't good. Kids need their individual attention, not just individual attention, individualized curriculum. We have to separate going back to what we opened up with, Elef Nichnasim Lemikra, Me'el Lemishnah, Hasor Letalmud, Echad Yotze Lo Ra. We'll be mechadish that thousands go into Talmud. Now, it means everyone has to engage a little bit, right? No one's parted from these three headspaces. There are different headspaces of Torah, but everyone has to choose their area of expertise and be oisik a little bit from the others that, to have a shaykhs. Everyone could find their area of expertise. Everyone could have geschmack in Torah. There's a lot of different svarim and a lot of different styles, right? It takes work. And we have to hold the moistus accountable, right? And if they tell you we have das Torah, fire them on the spot. If he has real das Torah, he's not afraid to be challenged and to give you a raya that Das Torah. He's not shame with us. He has Das Torah. Explain to you why he's right and how he's not reality challenged, but this is the way. All right. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold the Moistus accountable. Right. Right. And then the trans Hasidic, movement won't have any willing clients or victims. Right. One last thing. All right. Something very interesting about Kumsitzin. That's a real machla. And I said this, at the beginning of my remarks, well, this will go full circle. Amalek is a shapeshifter, and I'd say, just because he attacked for like 3 generations from this angle, doesn't mean that all of a sudden he's principled. He'd never attack from the other angle. He uses frumkeit, he uses, taiva, he uses any weapon, anything you'll fall for, Like I said, right now, in our days, he's using, the Shiites, and the leftist queer liberals. Yeah, it's got no principles. He'll attack from every angle, and he's getting away with it, even from contradictory angles. Oh, he's lo riza, kariza, machbalo, right? Right? So he shifts gears, but also we have to, everyone's talking about lo, we're very weak, which is baloney. We're am of mitsuyonim, right? My Rebbe, Moshe Shapir, whenever he used to read these parshas, they were reading now, Yitzias Mitzrayim, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, Binyan Mishkan, Zeh Zemagish Am Acher, right? So we feel like us, that we're the nation that, saw Akash upon him, and felt his shechina in our midst, oived him. Feels like a different people, but we're not. We are the same people. And the Sitra Achra is the one with the politics of low expectations, right? We're treating ourselves, and the Moistus are treating us, and Art Scroll is treating us the way the Democrats treat the minorities. Low expectations. Let us cater to you. Let us take care of you. Right? And we don't build our spiritual muscles. All right? It's about time we demand more of ourselves and demand more from the Moistus. Right? But one more thing. I want to talk about the Kumsitzin, and I don't want to date myself, but I grew up with, B'nai Akiva, and I grew up modern Orthodox, in West Hempstead. And I experimented with all these youth groups, B'nai Akiva, Ezra, NCSY, at Tzad HaShavim, they do a lot of singing, right? Now, the Doros have changed. And this is very important. I tried to explain this to a good friend of mine who visited Shabbos afternoon about how I view Kumsitzin as my mamish evil, right? Evil. And I cannot, and all these Jewish videos, music videos, it's all evil. It is mamish evil. Aside the fact that we said before, mi hitilimzos, we're supposed to deprive ourselves of this stimulation to feel the Rebbeinu Shalom's pain over Chorban Abayis. Mi hitilimzos, right? All right. But let me explain something. So much kiruv was done. NCSY, we mentioned it Shiloh before, didn't we? Right? All the kiruv that was done, and it all starts with a lot of singing. Right? So let me explain to you something. Okay? Humanity has changed fundamentally in the 21st century. And if we don't wake up now and catch this, we're in big trouble. Right? And it's not even just a Kleiso problem, it's a humanity problem. Right? Back in the last century, right? The default of a human being was to be a settled person, settled, thought out, rather reserved. Remember, it started deteriorating with the Walkman. That people just became addicted gradually, take their stimulation with them. Well, you couldn't, be stimulated unless you're from that race that carries the big boom boxes wherever they go, right? Yeah. Unless you're from, I don't think they do it anymore. They don't have to, right? But unless, you heard music, you were stimulated at le'itin, right? Not constantly. You were constantly visually and audibly, the beginning of the end was the Walkman, really. And I'm not kidding, right? So the default of humanity is to be basically a settled person, thought out, not in a state of excitement, because excitement takes you off center, right? All right, and therefore, hear this well, and therefore, right? So if your default is you're a thought out secular Jew, right? But I got to get you out of your comfort zone. I got to get you to I got to break your center of gravity because you're locked in a certain center of gravity of a certain perspective, of seeing things a certain way. I got to get you out of that. So I sing with you, and it gets you, and it moves you a little bit. It moves you out of your comfort zone, right? And so then you saw things from a different perspective, felt something, and then you go back to being a settled person. But you take that experience with you, and gets a process going. Okay. Right. So that's when in that era, right? So this was Kiruv, and if a person started, a secular person started singing a song and dancing, or singing a song and crying, it's the Pintaliyid. At least there might have been some legitimacy to that. But let me tell you something from the Piasetzna, right, about this, even in that era. Okay. All right. So Piasetzna says that, he warns, and like I said, if these guys would stick with the Piasetzna, just read Chavas Talmidim, straight through, and Hachshor Savrechim. They like jumping into Mavor Shram, like jumping to things they don't understand because it's not Machayev anything, right? All right, do the work, by the way. Don't just read it, for buzz. Do the work. It tells you how you're wasting your life and your wasted potential, and so much good stuff there in the Chavas Talmidim, Hachshor Savrechim. And from there, you move on to Sumer Avasetov. You move on, start with there. I understand that Tzedel Khan's a bit intense, right? Although he references Tzedel Khan, in Achshor Savrechem. Yeah. He wants you to do these, the Piasetzna wants you to do these visualization and to Yaskil Yom HaMisa. Yeah, that's Hasidus. Okay, not this crap, right? Part of my French, right? Really. But the Piasetzna says about Kumzitzin that, it could backfire. And this he said in his generation, 1930s, right? The whole thing could backfire because if you awaken the nefesh, because the song does bring out the nefesh, but then right after the Kumzitz, you fress. Right after the Kumzitz, you go catch a movie, whatever. So your nefesh has been exposed, and then you immediately put it into shtusim. You have to be careful. So he says, even in a generation where it was the modus operandi to get things going, make change, you got to be careful how you use it, right? Be always, and that's even then, to be always stimulated, right? You got to be careful because then if you go in that stimulated state into a shtus or a nevala, you just put your nefesh into garbage. You exposed your nefesh, you put into garbage. That's the right side. So even when it's good, it's serious business, right? But let's talk about what we're talking about. We are addicted to stimulation. Stimulation is not a sign of the Pintaliyid coming out. We are perpetually overstimulated and we're perpetually off center. And we are missing our core, a thought out core of what do we really believe. And emotionally, that what we really believe should go down to the lave and be, from Emunah to Bitachon, and then all the way down the spinal cord, the core down, and therefore you'll engage in Milchemes HaYetzer, because I don't violate my principles. You have a solid core. We don't have a solid core anymore. You wonder where all the mental illness is coming from, right? The gender dysphoria. And there's been plenty of Orthodox people that have transitioned. Let's not kid ourselves. There is a mental illness epidemic in the Orthodox world. Now, to think a crazy thought is inevitable. Chazal already said about Hiroi Avar, it's one of the things that are nitzobel, right? Right? And let alone a crazy thought, because it's coming in from all sides. A lot of the crazy thoughts we have in our head are not really our own thoughts. They're being induced by society, being induced by something you saw. And, because you don't have a solid central core, because you're always distracted, you're always hyperstimulated, which kills concentration. It kills being settled, right? You don't have a central core, so it penetrates directly into your heart. You don't have a solid central core that would repel these crazy thoughts. Gender dysphoria. So it's not a crazy idea that it might be the wrong gender. They're in the wrong body. If you have a healthy core, so that thought may be induced, and gets repelled, right? Doesn't penetrate the fortress, right? We don't have a fortress because we're constantly distracted. We never build up the central core. People can't concentrate anymore. A shir has to be 15 minutes. As I went to a kollel, he says 15 minutes once every 3 weeks. Yeah, it has to be just 15 minutes long. The Daf Yomi is catering to this sickness. Got to flip the page. Don't sit and concentrate what really was the kasha, how to turn it. I think Daf Yomi would have been a great idea if people would spend 3 hours on it. Right, in Eon Shir, a friend of mine was a big Magachir in one of the brisk wannabes, right? Without mentioning it, says, the Briskerov, you sit 20 minutes on a svara. I can't do that. I have to say a new svara every 2 minutes. Kids, they want the buzz. Can't sit on something, can't concentrate. A lot of the crazy arguments that the Apikorsa make, a lot of the crazy arguments that the leftists make, you could think through if you just say quasi changing and they move on to the next point. Or let's put it this way. You could defeat the Yetzer Hara if you just concentrate. This is sheker, this is wrong. I mean, there's also just putting a little bit of effort finally. As the Chovas HaTurim says, stamp your foot and say no. That helps. Right? A little bit of resistance would help, right? But even so, you think it through, but we don't think analytically. We don't think penetratingly because that takes time. That takes concentration. We're perpetually hyperstimulated, which ruins concentration. It's to the point I explained to a good friend of mine yesterday. I think kumzitz is the most evil thing, that you could kumzitz your way out of anything, right? Don't get me going. But by Gush Kativ, the tragedy was kumzitzed away, and I saw it, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. That's how they cope with it. Should have been a real time of cheshbon, and after they kumzitzed away. Even b'shas ma'isa, it's a horrible thing, because when you're stimulated, your rational zone goes down, because you don't want to ruin the experience. Thinking it, don't think, just feel. Horrible. Now, right now, the Yetzer Hara's weapon is that we're not thinking, right? Yeah, how you say we're not thinking? 2 svaros a second, you're not thinking, right? You're just flipping through thoughts. To think is to think analytically, think why it's mukhrach, think what difference it makes, think what is it mechayev me. That's the thing. If people would do that, which the yeshivas are not, the yeshivas, Daf Yomi, Art Scroll, is all catering to the sickness. So we're not getting better, right? And that's why now kids fry out, even though we did everything right, made it comfortable. No, problem is because you made it too comfortable, they never built their spiritual and intellectual muscles. That's why kids are going off the derech. That's why there's mental illness. That's why there's gender dysphoria. There's no core. V'hadam ayin. The adam is missing. Never built up that core with solid yesodis of emunah, solid yesodis, and solid cognitive skills, with the ability to take the time and concentrate and work things through. Hope I offended a lot of people, because maybe it'll be the difference of a change. Because right now, Am Yisrael is under attack. Lo eis lachashos. I think I've said all I can say. I don't need to double down on offending people, right? But it's time to make kimu v'kiblu, a total revolution, right? Total revolution of being makabel amita shel Torah, amita shel kol Torah kula, right? And to challenge ourselves, open those cupboards in the heart that you're afraid to open. Hold our moistus accountable, right? Don't be afraid of big, powerful or moistus. Don't be afraid of big, powerful organizations. Don't be afraid of, brainless gavirim, right? Don't be afraid, of big, powerful publication houses. Say, what's wrong is wrong. And if it's poison, it's poison. We're eating spiritual junk food. No, that's not even spiritual. Spiritual style junk food, like kosher style. Spiritual style junk food is what we're eating. And the limit of the Gemara has never been a bigger joke than it is today. Between Art School and between Daf Yomi, when it was always supposed to be the gym to build our mental and intellectual muscles. Now it's just a joke, right? And if it's not for everyone, let's divide the ones who it's for and and go back, restore the learning of Rif, or just Rambam. We have Bali Mishnah. What's wrong? No Kol Torah Kula, according to the Rambam. No Kol Torah Kula, even Be'iyun, according to Rambam. Rif with Rambam together. Rif, Rambam, Rimigash, Rambam. Rif, Rimigash, Rambam. Torah Shlema, according to one base medrash. He Milsa Zutra Sahi. And then we come out just Kireach Mikanu, Mikanu, Mikan. All right. I said my piece. I hope everyone's offended. And do all your shopping today. All your shopping today. Make your shlach manas today. Tomorrow's divrei atzomas v'zak kosam. Let's just, not just tear open the heavens. Let's tear open our hearts, right? And do kibu v'kiblu, right? And maybe we'll be zocha to the Geula Shlema, and we'll see, that this Purim, really, la yudim ma'asor simcha sasam yikar kein tielonu.